Number 5. Chris Watts. The deeply shocking and incredibly heartbreaking case of the Watts family murders completely captivated and horrified the entire world in August 2018. To outside observers and her thousands of social media followers, Shanann Watts and her husband Chris seemed to be living the absolute perfect, idyllic suburban life in Frederick, Colorado, raising two beautiful young daughters, Bella and Celeste, with a third child on the way. But behind the perfectly curated Facebook posts, Chris was deeply involved in a secret affair and aggressively seeking to completely erase his current life. When Shanann returned home from a business trip, Chris brutally strangled her in their bed. He then drove her body, along with his two living daughters, to a remote oil site where he worked. In an act of unimaginable, breathtaking cruelty, he smothered the two young girls and disposed of their bodies inside massive, incredibly toxic crude oil tanks, before burying his pregnant wife in a shallow grave nearby. Chris initially played the incredibly deceptive role of a deeply concerned husband on national television, pleading for his family's safe return. However, after utterly failing a polygraph test and facing mounting pressure from seasoned investigators, his horrific facade completely crumbled. He is currently serving multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Number 4. John List. The incredibly meticulous and highly calculated murders committed by John List remain one of the most chilling cases of a family annihilator in American history. In 1971, List was a deeply religious and highly rigid accountant living in a massive, 19-room Victorian mansion in Westfield, New Jersey. Facing immense financial ruin after losing his job and secretly stealing money from his mother's bank account, List decided that murdering his entire family was the only way to save their souls from poverty and moral corruption. On November 9, he methodically shot his wife, his mother, and his two youngest children as they returned home from school. He then made a sandwich, went to the bank to close his accounts, and attended his oldest son's high school soccer game before driving him home and shooting him as well. List then meticulously cleaned the massive crime scene, cut his own face out of every single family photograph in the house, turned on a religious radio station, and completely vanished. It took an incredible 18 years and a highly accurate clay bust featured on the television show America's Most Wanted before he was finally recognized and captured, living under a fake name and working as an accountant in Virginia. Number 3. The Menendez Brothers. The massive, incredibly highly publicized trials of Lyle and Eric Menendez became one of the most defining and fiercely debated cultural moments of the 1990s. The brothers grew up in immense, unimaginable luxury in Beverly Hills, California, the sons of Jose Menendez, a highly successful and incredibly demanding entertainment executive. On the evening of August 20, 1989, the brothers aggressively burst into the den of their massive mansion and brutally murdered their parents with multiple shotgun blasts as they watched television. Initially, the brothers completely avoided suspicion, incredibly spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of their massive inheritance on luxury cars, Rolex watches, and high-end restaurants in the months following the murders. However, their deeply flawed alibis quickly fell apart, and they confessed the crime to their incredibly panicked psychologist. During their sensational, nationally televised trials, the defense presented a deeply disturbing narrative, claiming the brothers had endured years of horrific emotional and sexual abuse at the hands of their father, and had killed out of sheer, absolute terror for their own lives. Despite deeply dividing the nation and causing intense public sympathy, both brothers were eventually convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, where they remain to this day. Number 2. Scott Peterson. The incredibly tragic disappearance and murder of Laci Peterson completely dominated the American news cycle for years, revealing a terrifying monster hiding behind the facade of a handsome, seemingly perfect husband. Laci, who was incredibly beloved and 8 months pregnant with their son Connor, vanished from her home in Modesto, California, on Christmas Eve 2002. Her husband, Scott Peterson, aggressively claimed he had spent the day fishing alone at the Berkeley Marina, nearly 90 miles away. As massive, community-wide searches were launched and Lacey's devastated family pleaded for answers on national television, Scott's incredibly calm and deeply deceptive behavior immediately raised red flags with seasoned investigators. The terrifying truth quickly emerged: Scott was living a massive double life and carrying on an intense affair with a massage therapist named Amber Fry, to whom he had previously lied and claimed he had already lost his wife. Fry bravely agreed to secretly record his phone calls for the police. For agonizing months later, the deeply decomposed bodies of Lacey and her unborn son tragically washed ashore near the exact marina where Scott had been fishing. Following a massive, highly sensationalized trial, Scott Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, though his sentence was later overturned to life in prison without parole. Number 1. Mark Hacking. The incredibly heartbreaking case of Mark and Lori Hacking is a terrifying example of a pathological liar going to the most extreme, horrifying lengths to desperately maintain a completely fabricated life. To their friends and incredibly supportive family in Salt Lake City, Utah, Mark and Lori appeared to be a deeply happy, highly successful young couple eagerly preparing to move to North Carolina so Mark could attend medical school. Lori, who was 5 weeks pregnant, went missing in July 2004 after supposedly going for an early morning jog. Mark aggressively orchestrated massive, highly emotional search efforts and pleaded for her safe return on national television. However, the deeply terrifying truth was that Mark's entire existence was a massive, incredibly complex lie. He had never graduated from college and had never been accepted to medical school. He had completely forged his transcripts and acceptance letters. When Lori finally uncovered his massive web of deception at work and confronted him, he brutally murdered her in her sleep with a .22 caliber rifle, wrapped her body in garbage bags, and threw her into a massive commercial dumpster. The heartbreaking discovery of her remains in a massive local landfill completely shattered the community,